the film Ugetsu, in that regard, I think is very much a commentary, or thought to be at least by many, a commentary on post-war Japan, or by post-war Japan, on what society had men do during World War II.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Skiffy and Fanny Shows at the Movies.
Success always comes at a price, and we pay in suffering.
Mm-hmm. You're learning about that, Daniel.
I am.
I'm Sean.
I'm Daniel.
And on today's show, we're discussing the 1953 Japanese period fantasy film Ugetsu Monogatari, which directly translates as Rain Moon Tales. It is based on the stories The House in the Thicket and The Lust of the White Serpent from Ueda Tsunari's 1776 collection of the same name. It is directed by acclaimed Japanese director Kenji Mizoguchi. It stars Masayuki Mori, Kinuyo Tanaka, Itaro Ozawa, Mitsuko Mito, and Machiko Kyo.
Before we get into our discussion of the movie, a reminder to our listeners to please share your questions and comments with us at skiffyandfantasy.com/listener suggestions. If you aren't already, join us for Twitch for Sean's Alphabet streams every Friday at 7 p.m. Central to be part of our interactive live streaming format. Finally, be sure to review and spread the word about our show, help support us through our Patreon, be part of our Torture Cinema polls, live watches, or other special Patreon-only events on Discord.
Perfect. All right, so Daniel, who wrote the script and left Event Horizon in the script, even though we're not talking about that, and so you will now have to explain what this movie is about. Because, as you say,
rather than
success always comes at a price, and we pay in suffering.
So much suffering.
Yeah.
Ugetsu takes place in the mid-1500s in Japan, in the Omi province, which is sort of central Japan. And it features primarily two male characters, Genjuro and his brother-in-law, Tobei. Genjuro, they're both peasants, they're both farmers, but they both sort of dream of a better life, or what they imagine to be a better life. Despite the fact that their wives try to remind them that they have a pretty good life right now. Genjuro, in addition to his wife, he has a son, and Tobei has the wife, and they live a simple life, but shouldn't they be happy with what they have? But no, they have dreams of being something else. Genjuro, in his spare time, also does pottery, and he's trying to make a living of that art, though primarily making it just to try to get more money than he does by farming. So he goes into nearby towns to sell his pottery. Tobei comes along to help him, but really Tobei just wants to get some money because he dreams of becoming a samurai. So as the men are off doing that, a local sort of respected sage advises Genjuro's wife, whose name is Miyagi, that those who seek profit in times of upheaval are often doomed to destruction. And it is indeed a time of upheaval, because this period in Japanese history, called the Sengoku period, is one of civil war. And so there's actually an attack on the village that is coming. And so after the men come back from the village with a bit of money, they basically have to flee mid making new pottery. And the village is attacked. They're fleeing, but their plans are to take the pottery and sell it in another nearby city. They cross on a boat, a lake, that is going to take them away from the marauding armies and get to this other city where they can sell the wares. But they encounter in sort of the fog covered lake another boat with a dying man in it that sort of serves as another omen or forewarning that danger lies ahead, and he's dying because he was attacked by pirates, and he basically says, don't go on, it's too dangerous. So Genjuro takes Tobei and Tobei's wife, whose name is Ohama, to the city. So they decide to go on, but Miyagi doesn't want to go, and so Genjuro leaves his wife Miyagi and their son to return to their village that has just been pillaged, and basically tells her to go and stay there until he returns. So Tobei, Genjuro, and Ohama go to sell Genjuro's pottery in this other city. Tobei chases off after some samurai that he sees and uses the bit of money he has to buy some armor and wants to go enlist and become a samurai, or at least a sort of the novice to a samurai. But he basically abandons Ohama to that, and when he goes to pursue that, and Ohama ends up getting raped by some soldiers, and after that has to turn to basically a life of serving soldiers in a sort of prostitution den. Meanwhile, though, Tobei's living the dream of becoming a samurai, and he gets money, he gets fame, and he only does get that, though, by basically stealing the head of a general that had been decapitated by one of his friends in an honorable death. And so he basically steals the samurai's head and takes it back to another samurai and claims he cut off the head to get in with them. Genjuro, meanwhile, is selling the pottery, but a noblewoman, who at least what we think is a noblewoman, comes to buy his pottery. Her name is Lady Wakasa, and she asks him to please deliver the pottery to her estate. And he does that, but then when he gets there, Lady Wakasa basically says, like, hey, come marry me. And he's kind of enraptured by her because it turns out she's not really entirely what we think she may be. And she's, in fact, dead. And she's a ghost of a woman who died, the daughter of a noblewoman whose entire house was basically slaughtered by a previous army and rival. And her ghost basically haunts and preys on people. And so she basically causes him to mostly live in a dreamlike state of enrapturement where he's forgotten he has a wife and a kid back at home. But when he goes into town to procure some things for her, he encounters, I don't know what the term would be, a religious mystic of sorts who sees him and sees that he has a cursed aura, if you will. And this mystic basically says, hey, you've been ensorcelled by this ghost woman. And so he writes script basically tattoos script that will break the curse on his back. And so when he returns to what he thinks is the sort of palatial home of Lady Wakasa, he's able to escape her. He realizes who he is. He realizes that he has a wife and kid at home. He manages to escape and finds that where he's been these past, days, weeks, however long it's been, under her control is basically the ruins of a palace that has been destroyed, and there's nothing there. So he staggers back home, but while he's been gone, marauding soldiers have killed his wife. She died basically defending her son and from soldiers that were basically looking for food and stole food from her, and she was fighting, and so they killed her. And so he gets home, and at first he basically dreams that she's there welcoming him home, until he wakes up from that and realizes, no, she's actually dead, and someone in the village has been taking care of his son. And the film concludes with the son laying some flowers or something on the mother's grave. In the meantime, the brother-in-law found out that his wife was in the working as a prostitute, and he swears to like revenge her on her, and he ends up giving up being a samurai and returns home to be a peasant with her. So they kind of have a happy ending, but apparently Mizoguchi didn't really want that to be the ending of the film. He wanted something that was much more pessimistic and sad.
Oh, yeah, because the ending we got isn't
Yeah, exactly.
Jeez. So Trivia Matson in chat did ask, could you just become a samurai with money? I thought you had to be born into nobility. And that is something of the setting of this piece, and probably something to do with so this is the golden age of Japanese cinema is what it's referred to. It's this, like Akira Kurosawa, and I think Ozu is the other
big one.
Yeah. And this comes after the war period, 'cause it's the 1950s. And so my understanding, and I'm not a Japanese film scholar, so I would maybe go out and like learn a little bit more to get more of the nuance than I could possibly give here. But my understanding is, like, during the war years, there's a very particular story that is told about Japanese culture that is sort of nationalistic in its portrayal of like samurai and other kinds of very classic figures. And so there's like some of that history and how film has presented these figures that is influencing the portrayal here. And then the Sengoku period, which, because of the Civil War period, many of those traditional expectations about how one becomes a samurai are significantly loosened. And so people would sometimes become like de facto samurai by dint of engaging as warriors and purchasing armor and these kinds of things, and in interacting in that space. I imagine some part of that is the fact that you've got a civil war and you've got different daimos fighting one another, and so you need a lot of armed bodies to fight that. And so that probably has a factor to do that. There's also some stuff I was reading that this is something I think is relevant in this film, which is when the brother-in-law becomes a samurai, he buys this armor and he's like gifted, I will give you these things because you've done the shogunate, basically, or the daimyo basically says that I'll give you all the things you want. And so he gives him vassals, etc. And that has something also to do with this era, which is that normal relationship where you have a lord and then you have these vassals and a master-servant relationship that begins to break down in this period. I don't understand exactly what that means for the period because I'm not an expert on this, but that also feeds into why samurai in this very specific period doesn't mean the sort of mythical or very rigidly formatted, like Ken Watanabe from the last samurai sort of image of the samurai. I think that those two factors are like feeding into the portrayal here. I mean, the samurai don't come across here as good people by any stretch. Every single one of them is presented in this film as violent, indiscriminately killing and stealing from the top down. And it just gets worse the further down the sort of pecking order you get, the lengths to which people will go. So like, the brother-in-law's wife who is, brutally sexually assaulted, right? It's not shown graphically to us, thankfully. But she's assaulted by, as far as I can tell, nobody of any specific consequence, except that they're wearing the armor and they're clearly part of this invading force that is here. And so she's just in the wrong place and they just abuse her. Or Miyagi, who is murdered, right? She's like walking in the woods on a mountain trail trying to escape. And it's two or three people who appear to be like low-level members of the military who are just starving, and the fight that ensues leads to them killing her rather tragically.
These men themselves, the sort of lowly men that kill her, they're just ordinary, normal peasant men from other villages that have been raided, right? Because when the army arrives, the reason why they arrive is to get food, to steal money, but also to take all the men into recruiting new people for the army. So it's basically they capture these men and make them fight for them. And the women they take for pleasure. And this...
To do with as they please.
Yes. And so this is also very much like the brother-in-law doesn't see this for what it is. He sees it as something noble and manly, that this is, as a masculine member of society, I am useless as a peasant. I should be, to really be noble and worthwhile and be a man, I should be out there fighting. And the best way to do that is to be a samurai and have that sort of honor and nobility that comes along, and the success and the riches that come along with that, right? But he very much craves being more of an esteemed man in society, and my understanding is that this plays in not as much to what was going on in the mid-1500s, but what Japan was wrestling with post-World War II, where the exact same things happened during Imperial Japan and during World War II, where, men fought because they thought that was what one did to be a man, and it was honorable. And there were women that were basically taken and used to do with what they wanted to do. And it was okay because they were, I'm not saying it was considered okay amongst them because it was part of the imperial necessities. And so the film Ugetsu, in that regard, I think is very much a commentary, or thought to be at least by many, a commentary on post-war Japan, or by post-war Japan, on what society had men do during World War II.
Yeah, I agree with you that he almost like views the samurai very childishly. Because nothing he tells us about why he wants to be a samurai has anything to do with what we're shown they're actually doing in this, right?
Not at all.
And he's well aware what's happening, right? They're told explicitly this other daimyo's army is coming to, destroy your lord, essentially, your daimyo. And so he's very well aware that the people coming, they're not there to be friends. They're there to conquer, to take, to steal, all of these things. But yet he views it as this, like, if I wear this, somehow I'm important. Because as a peasant, he's not. I mean, he is. He's just important to other people in his circle. But to the wider society, like, nobody respects any of the peasants, right? They don't value them. They're at the very bottom of this pecking order. But yet he does have a wife who cares about him. And it's only when his failure to be there for his brother-in-law and be there for his wife, that failure in seeking his own ambitions, his childish ambitions, that ultimately leads to him both giving up what he has wanted since the beginning of this story, but also realizing how much he could have potentially lost by seeking all of this. As you say in the tagline, right? Like, success comes with a cost, right? And the cost is really quite severe for these characters, right? In pursuing success in a time of very great danger, they all almost lose literally everything.
And they're warned repeatedly by the women in the film, or by
Constantly.
Spiritual
They don't listen.
People, that this is a dangerous route to take. And before Genjuro decides to go to this other city to sell his pottery and try to, get more money out of it, he does that because he gets a fair amount of money from the first, stab at this. And he's like, look what I got. I could be getting so much more. War is good for business. And his wife, Miyagi, says to him, you got lucky this one time, but think what might happen if it doesn't go as well. Think of what might happen if disaster happens to all of us and what we might lose. But his, narrow focus is not on that at all. And so he like typical male fashion, brushes her aside and just says, no, it'll be fine. We're going to do this. And
even though the thing that she says to him is, because he brings home, right, a kimono, like a real kimono with a beautiful design, right? And he was like, he feels so proud of himself. Like, I've always wanted to give this to you, and I had given it to you. And she obviously likes it, and she loves it. But the thing she says is, the kimono itself isn't the thing that mattered to me. It's your kindness. Mm-hmm. That is what makes me happy.
That you wanted to give this to me. Yeah.
You wanted me to have something. You wanted to treat me. You wanted to show through a gift or some other action your care for us. That's what she says. And he doesn't hear what he hears is, buy more expensive stuff.
Yes.
Not just do nice things for my wife. Right? Which is what can mean many different things. That's the lesson he should have heard, which is, if I just show my wife kindness and show her I care for her, even if we don't have money, she'll be happy.
And enjoy the happiness we have here together.
The women are all smarter in this.
Oh, yeah, by far and
100%.
And this is the first film that I've actually gotten to see by the director, whose name I'm blanking on, Mizoguchi. I've seen a lot of Yasujiro Ozu. I've seen like The Seventh Samurai, but I haven't seen any Mizoguchi until this. But apparently that's a frequent theme in his movies of women being far more intelligent, far more perceptive, and men not listening to them.
It's a contrast that's there between what men's ambitions are and how they manifest versus how women's ambitions are manifest. Because both of the women here only really just want their husbands at home, working at home, doing what they do in this case, farmers, right? Mm-hmm. Doing that really well. And that's it. They don't really... None of them ask for riches. None of them ask for any of these things. But the men all seem to place their worth in what they're able to acquire, the material, right? Yes. They look at the material representations, whereas the women mostly don't seem in this to care. And don't even talk about the child, because I don't think the child says a darn thing in this. I thought at one point the kid was dead, by the way, because like the kid was like asleep in his arms. But he didn't move for a very long time, and I was like, is this the moment we find out the kid died too? Because the kid spends... It was kind of funny.
He yells like daddy a few times.
Does he?
Yeah.
Does he say daddy?
Oh,
I don't remember that.
But
he like rides on his mom's back.
When Kenjuro leaves on the boat back across the lake and leaves Miyagi and the son behind, he yells daddy like several times.
I don't remember that.
To them, basically calling him to return to them, and he just doesn't listen to them.
He doesn't listen to his kid. I mean, I don't remember it, but I think it's just because in my mind, the kid's just mute. I really did think the kid had died. I thought that he was holding the dead body of his kid in the end sequence, because the kid doesn't move. Yeah. Well, that would be the darker story.
Yes. But what you were saying before about what the sort of what the women want and manifest versus what the men want to manifest, that's also true. What I find interesting about the character of Genjuro is he has this artistic side to him that his brother-in-law does not have. His brother-in-law is purely after material things and fame. Fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory. That's basically what his line is. But Genjuro, he's not... He is after wealth because he wants this wealth to be able to buy things for his wife, who he loves, buy things for his kid. He wants more success than he has. But he also has sort of this artistic pursuit of pottery. And one of the interesting things is that she doesn't have any problem with that. She helps him with the pottery. Miyagi helps him with his pottery. She supports him in that throughout. The issue is just when he wants to do risky things and leave her behind to try to get money for the pottery. If he was
Yeah.
just sort of devoted to the artistry of it and for doing it for art's sake, there'd be no issue. It's the idea he wants to capitalize from it and actually make money on that art, where it starts becoming an issue. And so I think there's also somewhat of a commentary about art and the commoditization of art that goes on in this movie as well, in that regard.
A little bit. Yeah, I think a little bit. There's some aspect of that. When he meets the lady, for example, and he sees his cups and things in her palace, he remarks, almost like crying almost, he's like overwrought with emotion about the idea that, somebody so important as her would want his things, that his little trinkets would be in such a grand space.
Yeah, he even says, like, my little pieces don't deserve to be here with you. And yeah.
But, like, his little pieces are, as far as we can tell, remarkably well done. The glaze that he puts on, right? I mean, I guess we can't trust the ghost lady because maybe she's not being entirely honest, but she does remark about the, like, blue glaze he uses on all his pottery, and she finds that really quite beautiful. I mean, I guess she could be lying, but it is a thing that, they go to this market, to this other market, and he does seem to be successful in selling his wares in this bigger city. So people like what he's doing. So I'm not convinced that she's being dishonest. She's maybe selling it a bit more than maybe she would if she were real and not a ghost monster woman. But we have to believe that he is, in fact, an artist, right? And when we watch the pottery sequences of him building these various little pieces, I guess the actor took pottery because, like, it's very clear he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
There's a delicateness to his hand. It's very clear that he's an artist. So I think to some degree you're very, very right that there is an ambition there, but there's like an ambition that isn't purely material, right? He wants his art to be recognized. He wants the money, although I think his reason for wanting the money is considerably more noble because he wants to be able to buy nice things for his family, which, that's not a terrible motivation, to earn money. But he does seem to he wants to be, like, valued for more than just being a farmer. Which the film ends on, by the way. There's that the shot pans away from the child leaving an offering and then messing with the flowers on his mother's grave, and what we see is a farmer tilling a field, right? And all we see is, like, fields in the distance, in the wilderness. And so the image at the end is almost suggesting that the idea here is not to seek material wealth for some, especially for the brother-in-law whose motivations are not pure in the slightest, but rather that the simple life is infinitely greater.
Yeah, I think it's that the ending is beautiful in that it also parallels the beginning. So the opening shot is this beautiful panoramic shot of the area of the region that shows that same sort of agrarian focus, and then sort of pans. It's almost like a scroll going as the camera pans across and then goes and focuses in on this one particular compound. And the ending kind of reverses all of that. And I agree completely that it's nailing that theme down, that spiritual fulfillment and happiness lie elsewhere than the material.
Yeah, I would agree. Trivia Matt says it in chat, asks maybe the slain mother gets to come back as a ghost in the sequel. And I wanted to respond to this differently than the question suggests, because the slain mother does appear here as a ghost.
Yeah.
Miyagi appears when he returns to his wife and son, and he has this sort of illusory dream almost where she's very present as a ghost, where he's back with his wife and his kid, and it's almost like the beginning again. They're just together, being a family. And we learn in a very, very subtly, and he does this a couple of times in this film, Mizoguchi does, where the lighting changes on characters. Shadow seems to move in over characters, and that is our big clue that something is off here. And so how the lighting works and what the characters interact with. One of the things that some of the I've seen in the criticism of this, academic discussion, I'll call it instead of criticism, was that one of the things that you note about her in that sequence is what she's doing is all of these very simple things around the house, arranging items, putting things back where they belong, very domestic kind of standard work before the light comes in almost angelically, and then it pans away and she's gone. And then that's the moment when all these people show up and they find out that he's back and that the child is there, and slowly you realize she's been dead this entire time. And she narrates the last lines of the film. It is her voice that narrates over, this ghostly apparition's voice that narrates. But it is very different, her ghost, from the ghost of the lady, because the lady entices people, sucks people in, and traps them. She's a predator. The wife, Miyagi, is not. She presents herself as honestly loving. I would describe her as quite loving.
Well, particularly given that he's returning home, and if I recall correctly from the words she says to them in their conversation, he comes back, repentant, realizing he was in the wrong, that he's done a very stupid thing. He's just so glad that she's okay, that everything's okay, and they can return to how life was. And if I recall correctly, her words to him are very reassuring and like, it's okay, I forgive you, I love you. But her words also have that sense, if I recall, that she's saying other things to him like, I'm not here anymore. Like, she's basically through her words saying, I'm dead, I'm gone. And he doesn't hear those. He just hears, the I forgive you, you'll be okay, the reassurances. But she very carefully doesn't say things and respond to him in terms of her being okay and still alive. And so it's a brilliant scene from that aspect of directing, of the cinematography, the lighting, the script. This whole movie is, in a way, it's easy to see why it's been such an influential movie for a lot of film directors, and, ranking up there as one of the greatest films ever made. I can completely see that. And that scene at the end is one example of that.
There's a lot of really excellent sequences in this film. He does really excellent work of I don't know my shot compositions very well anymore. I used to have the language down better, but these sort of like medium shots to wide shots.
Medium and wide are pretty much all that's used, yeah.
Yeah, the wide shots in particular. I was thinking like Miyagi's Death, right? Which, if I recall, begins as this wide shot, and it's like one take, and then it scrolls over, pans over, to give us the rest of the shot, which is eventually her death. And by doing that, it like flips the directions of things because of the way it's like on a crane or something. And so the way it moves, like the lines all flip. And so there's like a reversal that almost like visually symbolizes the reversal of her condition as moving from living to dead. Right. And there's this shift that happens. And there's another thing that I was reading about that there's a Chiharu has an essay called History and Film Style on Absent Cause in Mizoguchi's films from the 50s. It's a mouthful, but I wanted people to be able to find it. They want to read it. The PDF, I think, is free. But if you can't get it, I don't know, send me a message and I can get it for you if you want to read it. But he writes this great little thing that applies to Ugetsu in particular about the way the camera works in this. And it's not just this film. He does in a bunch of different films, but specifically this one I think is really, really, really good. And what he says is that in Mizoguchi's war and wartime films, the camera moves as if the diegetic world existed independently of the camera. So diegetic meaning, in what he means here in the context of the film is that what what the audience experiences and what is being shown subjectively in the film itself are the same thing, right? There's no sort of subterfuge there. And so this autonomy of the camera movement, as narrators found, less in his post-war films. For Birch, it revealed an inclination towards the economics of Western dramaturgy in the mode of classical Hollywood cinema. This change can be analyzed as a difference in the relationship between the camera and diegetic reality. The camera's function in the 30s and 40s stays rather stable in relation to the diegetic world. The reality of diegesis was stabilized on one level, and the camera moved within it independently. So basically, what the camera shows us is effectively what we get. Whatever the characters are experiencing in that world, whatever the camera shows us in that world, the subjective experience within that is the same experience we're getting from outside of it. And so essentially reality remains stable. And so the reality in the 1950s, the relation of the camera to the diegetic reality is not constant. And that is true here because there are multiple sequences, including the one we were just kind of talking about towards the end here, where we enter a scene and what looks to be the sort of subjective reality for the character and what we are visually seeing are different things, right? They think, the husband, for example, he thinks that he is in this palace with these people. And we learn over time that actually none of that is real. What we've been shown is objectively not true. And that happens at the end. It happens a bunch of different sequences where things that seem like they would be one thing are actually something else. And the camera catches that very subtly, where it presents to us something that we would take at face value if we were reading this as a film that was being direct at all times. And in many cases, the reality of this film fluctuates as you go through it. Honestly, it's super clever to do because it's I think a thing that we just kind of take for granted now, like a character today would like be in a dream state, and one of two things would happen. The dream state would be presented, and it would be presented in a way like we just know. The character's in a dream state, they don't know it, but we know it. Or they would do the thing, which is what this film does, where neither one of us actually knows which reality is on offer at this moment, right? Except the character thinks that one thing is true, and we don't know in this moment if it is, because we've been tricked before to think something's real that wasn't. And so there are now moments here where we have to pay attention to, lighting, shot composition, different sorts of choices that are made of how characters interact. The thing you were pointing out, which I didn't actually notice, but now I really want to go back, which is the exact words she says to him, because when you contrast them to what we have to assume is the objective reality of the world, right? She talks directly to him in conversation in their opening sequence together. Yeah. And here, that's not really what happens. It's almost like she's not really in the room with him in the same way. Yeah. So it's super clever, really great stuff. And this is 1953, not, Michael Bay stealing it in 2022 or whatever.
The wide shots, sort of the clues of where things are different. One of the things I picked up watching through it a second time was some of those wide shots, like when they're in the city and they're selling the pottery. It's like huge crowds of people. They're like constantly in motion. There's people all over. Then when Lady Wakasa arrives, there's silence. The noise of the crowd kind of dims away. And you have this wide shot seeing sort of like from above as well. And you have all those people start coming out of the shot. And you just have her with her servant lady approaching. And it's just isolation. And then later when they're at the Katsuki mansion, at her home, the palace, or what he thinks is the palace, there's these same wide shots, but it's stark black and white. There's utter isolation. It's like just them. It's like loneliness. And it seems haunted and not real. And so different from the life and the bustle of the city. There's a few servants, but there's not like bustling servants all over. There's not a lot of noise. It's much more naturalistic. And there's just those dichotomies that I think are done so well.
Yeah, there's a lot of those throughout this, right? You go from like their village to when they go to the lake as one big contrast, right? Where the village is very, we don't see a lot of people, but like there are people there, and it's like people live there, and it is like there's like a little culture here, and it kind of feels lived in, and people are off doing whatever they do. But the second they go to this foggy, by the way, really brilliant shooting, by the way, the foggy lake, very creepy
as hell.
It feels dead. It really does.
It's like you're crossing the sticks.
It is like they're crossing the sticks. You're right. I felt like it felt so. I was trying to figure it out. Like, are they actually on a lake, or is this like a set? Because it just feels so unnatural. And a lake should be a thing where, like, especially this time, like, they're not poisoning the whole damn lake. So, like, there should be, like, ducks and birds and, like, all kinds of, like, little critters and things. It should feel like there should be fishing boats and, like, all.
It's the largest lake in Japan, apparently. So
apparently, and it feels like death.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, I had meant to say before, when you were talking about Lady Wakasa as being sort of like she's the predator, she's dangerous, she's a monster. At the same time, she's a victim here, right?
True.
She is basically a cursed ghost who's living an unnatural ghost existence that is sort of a physical manifestation of desire. Because the whole reason why she is a ghost, the whole reason for her being and for luring Genjuro in is because she died as a young girl or young woman before she ever was able to really know what love was. Her father was killed, her whole entire, family was destroyed, and she was killed as this young woman before she really had come into maturity of life. And so she didn't get to live her life. And what's evil about her is not her as much as she has been turned, or at least some aspect of her has been turned into a bastardization, something evil and demonic, if you will, of pure desire, of feeding off of others to fulfill something she wasn't able to have in life. All these other characters already have that in life. They have their loves. They have their family. Their family was still alive, at least completely. But even still, they have living family, right? Genjuro's wife is dead, but his sister is still alive. His brother-in-law is alive, and his son is alive. And so there's that contrast again, too. And so that ghost, yes, is evil, but at the same time, it's not she that was evil. It's a... And the sort of mystic even makes it clear, the religious priest makes it clear that this sort of love that Genjuro has with Wakasa is unnatural because she's dead. She's no longer human. This is a pure desire. It's not actually love that's controlling things.
That's really interesting because you're changing my mind a bit, because a predator... that implies like an intent that is innately wicked, right? It is trying to do harm, but you're completely right that Lady Wakasa she's not trying to ruin lives. She's trying to have a life that was denied to her.
All that's left of her is her pure desire to have that love that she never had while alive.
And one of the servants even says really depressingly, right, that, don't be unfaithful to her. Don't, like, just take this from her, right, towards the end when he sort of, like, swinging the samurai sword around. Don't sort of, like, destroy this. You're basically destroy everything. And you're right, because, like, if that's the only desire she has left, and that is the only thing left of her is this desire, then to deny it is, like, almost like killing her, which is really depressing when you remember that, like, how. But
it's the acceptance that she is dead, as horrible as it is that she was killed.
Unfortunately, yeah,
by terrible other people.
She has these.
Yeah, I don't know what
that was.
The sort of dark makeup
like
or shadows or
yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, well, it wasn't just you.
I was assuming something from Japanese tradition.
Maybe.
And from certain styles of Japanese theater, but I honestly don't. I'm not familiar enough to know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe if somebody does, because
let us know.
I couldn't figure it out.
I was curious as well.
Yeah.
So before we finish up, one of the main things I did want to talk about, and I'm curious on your opinion, is the music in this film. I think we should talk about the music. And what you just said reminded me of that, because to me, the music is just exceptionally haunting. And I don't know how much of that is sort of like a Westerner looking at Japanese music and saying, oh, the Japanese style is haunting, and to them it's just normal. Or if it's really meant to be, I'm assuming it's meant to be haunting, at least to some regard, and creepy. Yeah. But again, I'm not as familiar enough with Japanese culture in that regard of the music to definitively speak on it. But the effect it had was definitely like achingly beautiful and haunting. The groans, the vocalization, the chanting, that was interspersed with the flute and the drums and harp and all the others. Amazing.
It's very interesting. I knew immediately that it was the music that is often associated with kabuki theater. And I knew that only not because I'm some like magic genius. I took an Asian arts class in community college, and one of the things that we covered with Japan was, some of the theater forms of Japan. And so I did a little bit of research on kabuki. I'm not an expert by any stretch, but I knew immediately that this was some of the music in this was inspired by and deployed in kabuki theater. And then I looked it up, and it turns out I was totally right. And so there's elements of that. The composer, or at least the main composer, is Fumio Hayazaka, and apparently he thought that Japanese film should have Japanese music. Although there are other influences here, there are some Western influences in some parts of it. And then there were some other composers brought in, I guess, to add some more authentic sound from the period. I don't know exactly what that is. But I mentioned that because with kabuki theater, the music is, kabuki is like a theatrical dance with very elaborate and remarkable costumes and very dramatic presentation. It's often like made fun of in Western culture, which just annoys me because I would love to see an actual kabuki theater performance so that I could like really experience something like that. But it uses a lot of like these drums and these hits and some of these sounds that you hear in the film, and it made me just think that what it was adding was a very unique dramatic flair to the proceedings of what we were going to be witnessing. And certainly, I think you're completely right. There are sequences here where they were deliberately trying to make things unsettling. And then there are moments where I think you're right also that if you just don't understand this music, and I would say even to some degree I don't, it may present itself as being eerie and kind of, little scary and creepy to a Westerner who doesn't understand the music. I think you're completely right. One of the weird facts about this film, it was sent... So it was a film that was thought it would have more success abroad, which makes me sad. But also it did win an award, so I guess they were technically correct, and then it became very famous. And part of the reason for that was in the 50s, there's this period of cinema where in the West where they begin to like look out to the world and go, oh, there's other cinema, right? Isn't it interesting? And like we should look at all of these other people's things. But of course, it's the West, so the West has its innate biases about what it looks for in things. And one of the things that comes up in a lot of the literature on it is this idea of like Japanese-ness or Japanness, of like things must feel sufficiently Japanese for us to like really be interested in it. And if it's not Japanese enough, it's not foreign and exotic enough. This is sort of a super reductive way of thinking of it. And so there was like an element of that, of like, oh, this film feels very much like what Westerners would think of a Japanese film to contain, which fair enough, it involves samurai and, farmer lives, a lot of the Japanese musical stylings, Lots of different, like, cultural elements that are throughout the story. It's based on very classic Japanese, like ghost tales, essentially. So in a lot of ways, it very much represents Japanness, whatever we call that. So that's probably also a factor in how the music's received by the West, as they see it as, especially in 1953, where
Right.
like they don't know a damn thing.
Even more, though, in some ways, watching it in 2025, because these movies are classics, right? They're classics because they are exceptional, but they're also classics because they become the cliche, right? They weren't necessarily cliched at their time, but when you, like, if you watch like a 1940s film noir or something, it might seem cliche now, but that's because we've seen, tons of cliches and, comic versions of film noir.
That's true. Yeah.
So I wonder how much of this too seems sort of like what all of our expectations are of a Japanese movie, because this has become a defining thing of a piece of Japanese cinema, right? So
yeah.
I just remembered there's also Miyagi's appearance to him in the town when he goes in to try to buy the things to have them shipped to the mansion.
Oh.
Right before she appears. No, it must have been before that. It was right after he left selling his pottery and he's trying to figure out where to go to deliver them. He sees this vision of his wife appear in silhouette and come and talk to him. And so there's this brief scene with Miyagi, and then that's interrupted by the appearance of Lady Wakasa again to then take him to the mansion. I had completely forgotten about that other one.
Yeah.
And it's just such a striking image of that silhouette coming out along with the bells playing to really draw you in. That something weird's happening.
Yeah, that's really good.
If you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend that you seek it out to see.
I agree, 100%. It's really good. It's on Plex at the time of this recording for free. There's a version also on YouTube that probably somebody put there illegally.
It's on Max. If you are subscribed to Max, it's available there. Or Criterion just released their 4K, which I despise. I hate 4K. Blu-ray. So unnecessary. But there's the Blu-ray version, but it's been on DVD for, tons of time too. So you can grab the DVD copy. It's probably a lot cheaper now that they came out with the Blu-ray and 4K.
Strongly recommend it. Well, we did it.
Any other thoughts, or do we wrap up?
I think we just wrap it up, Daniel.
Alrighty.
I think we've done it. I don't want to share any more. My mouth has moved enough.
All right.
All right, folks. If you'd like to let us know what you thought, or you watched this movie and you want to offer a thought, maybe something we said you have more ideas about, or can answer one of our questions, skiffyandfanty@gmail.com is the best place to go. If you also want to come help and support the show by contributing reviews or contributing in other ways behind the scenes, same thing. Send us an email. We'd love to have you. Please join our Discord at our Patreon page. We are on Blue Sky, Threads, Mastodon, YouTube, a whole bunch of other places. If you go to skiffyandfanty.com/skiffythings, you will find links to all of that stuff. We are live every Friday at 7 p.m. Central on Twitch. So you can go to twitch.tv/alphabetstreams for that. And then if you like what we do, please review us on all the apps that you can, especially the app you listen to us on. And if you don't listen to us on an app, go to an app and just review us anyway. Please tell your friends about the show, repost our things on socials and all that stuff. And then join our Patreon, patreon.com/skiffyandfanty. I'm at SeanDuke.net. Alphabet Streams on Twitch, my socials and blog and all that stuff. If you just go to SeanDuke.net/DukeThings, you'll find all of that.
You can find me, Daniel, on the Skiffy and Fanty blog, or at Reading 1000 Lives on Blue Sky, or my blog, reading1000lives.com.
All right, as required by the bylaws of the Skiffy and Fanty show, I have to make this happy. And so Daniel and I are very pleased to announce that we will be clearing out our retirement accounts and buying a remote mountain cabin on a big old hill in the middle of nowhere. And we are going to spend the rest of our lives reading books and things. And just enjoying tea and general merriment and those kinds of things. And occasionally a very good scotch, mostly for Daniel.
Perfect.
And on that note, happy ending and scene. If you want to support this show, you can go to patreon.com/skiffyandfanty or skiffyandfanty.com, our website, where you can get access to all of our fancy things. Our music comes from Holy Mole. You can support him and his work at patreon.com/holymole. Thank you for listening.